Hey everyone, this is Cameron from Renegade Animation on renegadepopculture.com. If you like what we do, please give us a like, a follow, and a rating on Apple Podcast or wherever else you listen to us. We are everywhere. That way we can keep doing what we love, and that's talking about animation. And now, on with the show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host for this evening. Joining me, as always, is the animation guru himself, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
And today's episode is an interesting one. We've got reviews for Star Wars, Tales of the Jedi, and two Netflix anime. One is a sci-fi series called Exception, and the other is Romantic Killer. I'll let you figure out what that one's about. But first, we're going to start with, honestly, the one we have the least to say about. And it's not for lack of quality or anything. This is Star Wars Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah, so these are 6 episodes that follow small little story arcs for 2 of the franchise's most popular characters, Ahsoka Tano and Count Dooku. With Count Dooku, who is voiced by the always incredible Corey Burton, it's more or less a road to villainy plot of what happened to make Count Dooku slip into the dark side. Basically, he was not happy with how things were being run by the Jedi, so he thought he had a more accurate way of ruling the universe. With Ahsoka, it's more or less a origin story for her, a training montage, and then a story arc for her to get back into the Clone Wars timeline of sorts for Star Wars. A little bit after the Bad Batch and such. At least that's from what I could tell continuity-wise. They're each about 16 minutes long. They aren't exactly like super complex stories. I mean, they're interesting though. Count Dooku, seeing the flawed ways of man, thinking, I could handle this situation much better than trying to make peace, which of course is what makes him turn into a Sith. Maybe it's just because I haven't fully been catching up with the CGI series of Star Wars shows. These 6 episodes look amazing.
I think this might be some of the best CG animation we've seen from Lucasfilm. Maybe it is because it's a shorter series, so they had more time to focus on the quality. But yeah, compared to the 2008 film, they've come a long way.
Gosh, it's amazing how that film got into theaters. And
right?
It was like, not the greatest looking thing ever. It looked more like a TV movie, which probably would have done better that way. It wouldn't have left such a bad first impression with everyone. Because I remember when it came out, it had essentially not any of the major stars. It was mostly just the TV actors, which they aren't bad. Yeah, it just wasn't the best foot forward that they could put. And before Ahsoka became one of the franchise's most beloved characters, she was considered one of the weaker additions to the franchise. Not the worst part. There were definitely a few characters during that original Clone Wars CGI show that were hated more. Let's just say that. But here, there's actual shadows and lighting, and everyone has a more painted, textured look onto them, and the backgrounds look super detailed, and these CGI models mix with the background and foreground elements more. It doesn't have the same issues as most CGI action series do, where you can tell where the background is compared to everything else. The voice cast is good here. Like I said, I think Corey Burton steals the show every time he's on screen.
Absolutely.
But Ashley Eckstein is also very good. I liked seeing some of the other characters again, like James Arnold Taylor as Obi-Wan and Matt Lanter as Anakin. Obviously, D. Bradley Baker is just one of the MVPs of the Star Wars CGI series because he was the voice of pretty much every clone. So a lot of times you could have episodes where the clone troopers were to focus and it would just be him talking to himself.
Those episodes are always fun.
They had like some of the more interesting stories, which is why I think really liked these shorts. And I hope to see them do more of these with the Star Wars universe, because some of the best episodes from the CGI Clone Wars show were the clone troopers actually got to be personalities instead of, a army of red shirts that, you didn't differentiate one another outside of the Bad Batch and Captain Rex. And we also got like Phil Lamar as Bail Organa. Bryce Dallas Howard shows up as Yaddle, the female Yoda character, who I don't think even got a whole lot of lore and time on screen anywhere. So this was like one of the first, or at the very least, one of the first things I remember where Yaddle actually got attention.
As far as official canon, I think this is like the most we've seen of her on screen.
I mean, I'm sorry that it has to be a death, but just small, interesting stories. And I did like seeing the Inquisitor, which reminds me of like some of the stuff from that Star Wars game from a year or two ago, where Inquisitors had like these cool, well, I mean, like they weren't Sith Lords per se. They were more, who was that robot general from the Clone Wars story arc? Grievous?
Yeah, Grievous.
Like they had some Sith powers, but they were mostly well-trained lightsaber users. And the Inquisitor in the final episode is voiced by Clancy Brown.
He definitely has a very intimidating presence to him.
Yeah. It was all about Ahsoka realizing that she can't really run away from being a Jedi. I don't know why they had Liam Neeson back as Qui-Gon Jinn for the third short, where it just goes full Count Dooku as a bad guy. He's there for one line. I mean, nothing against him. Hey, get that paycheck. It's just amusing. I don't know if I would have come back for a line.
You'd think, like, if you were going to get Liam Neeson back, he'd have a more substantial role. And maybe this is just a taste of more to come in the future. Just to bring him back for one line seems a bit ridiculous.
Did you have a favorite episode? I think mine was the first and second Count Dooku focus story, where he helps a hostage situation when he's younger with a young Qui-Gon Jinn, who's voiced by Michael Richardson, and then is on a mission in the second one to solve a murder of a Jedi with Mace Windu, who's voiced by T.C. Carson. Those were my favorite because you really got to see a little bit more of the slippery slope, as they would say.
My favorite is episode 4. If for no other reason than the scene with Dooku and Yaddle at Qui-Gon's funeral, that one got to me.
No, it was definitely a good story. But otherwise, there's just not much else. Just little side stories. I wish they could have talked about more characters instead of just the two favorites, but I get it. If you're going to do a spin-off, reel them in with something familiar and then start going off and focusing on different Jedi or different characters and such.
This feels like a proof of concept, and then assuming this does well, I imagine the next batch will probably be, instead of 6 episodes, it'll be 12, and you'll have 4 different main protagonists. And who knows, maybe they'll all be the same era. Maybe we'll get like some post Rise of Skywalker stories, or maybe we go to the High Republic.
Maybe during like the Mandalorian timeline and such.
Yep, that's another option. The sky's the limit for this franchise.
I hope they keep experimenting, because I know the next season of Star Wars Visions is supposed to have different directors and different shorts from all over the world and not just anime. So we'll just have to see where they keep going with the Star Wars. Because at this point in time, I'm fine with pre-existing IP and original stuff existing. I just need the original stuff to balance out the pre-existing franchise stuff, and the franchise stuff has to still be good, or at least good on a consistent basis.
I agree with that.
But I think it's time to move on to our next show, which is the Netflix 8-episode series Exception. We were going to talk about this in the last episode to cover a few horror-related pieces of animation, but we had to make an exception because it was more of a science fiction story than a actual true horror story, which is fine. It just, for the Halloween or post Halloween episode, I wanted to focus on more horror supernatural stuff. So the premise for this is humans are searching a new galaxy for potential new planets to terraform after being forced to leave Earth. To explore a potential planet, Womb, a 3D biological printer, creates an exploration team, one individual at a time, to man the spacecraft. However, a fatal exception causes one crew member, Lewis, to be misprinted as a deformed monster that could potentially pose a threat to the rest of the crew. A new, successful printing of Lewis joins the crew to help in the situation, which raises philosophical questions of humanity and self in life. It's amusing that the premise on the Wikipedia page makes it seem like it's more about the monster than it really is.
If anything, the monster is probably the biggest hero out of everyone in the main cast.
Don't go into this thinking you're going to get like a thing, or I'm going to go into a deep cut video game from the Sega Saturn, Enemy Zero kind of situation where the crew has to fend off against a monster or something. The monster becomes a threat up until, I think maybe episode 5.
I would argue even sooner, like episode 3 or 4.
That sounds about right. I think you have to go into this show knowing it's more of a heady philosophical sci-fi story, like as a drama, than an actual like, oh, we got to kill the monster before it kills us kind of situation. Well, it's written and directed by Hirotaka Adachi. It's produced by Tatsunoko Productions, with the designs of everything being done by the famous Yoshitaka Amano, who is mostly famous for designing stuff for like Final Fantasy, Vampire Hunter D, with music by Ryuichi Sakamoto, who I think we've actually talked about a few times here. He's worked on stuff like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. That's the David Bowie film. Like, he's been everywhere. It's all about humans colonizing a new planet. And then, for a lack of a better word, an exception is made when things hit the roof. At first, I was kind of disappointed that it was more of a think piece than a shooty monster thing. But as the episodes went on, I was fairly interested. Not to say it doesn't stumble in its storytelling. I think it balances its comedy with its drama. Not great.
The animation it doesn't really support the tone shifts as well as probably the next show we'll be discussing. But as far as the overall story and like the themes dealing with humanity, self-preservation, survival, all of that, the more thematic elements hold up better than any specific details.
Oh yeah, I think it's a constantly interesting show to watch and listen and see how the characters all try to have a battle of morality of how to deal with the Lewis monster at first, who's voiced by Nolan North. And then once another copy of Lewis arrives, of like, well, do we kill the monster Lewis? But isn't that killing Lewis? And what they define as life, or what they can call saving a human life, and or what if the thing that the humans are doing is actually a good idea. When they get to this planet that are like, okay, this could work. They just have to terraform it for humans living on it, but they're killing the life forms that are on the planet for them to make it livable. So it definitely has a lot that it wants to say. And that's fine. We get so many anime that try to act smarter than they are, or are just so vapid because they're not really interested in being worth investing into. They're just there to either sell a product like a mobile game, a manga, a video game, or to like puke out some political viewpoints and like what we're going to talk about with the next show. I like the designs of the humans. I know everyone has biggest glass of haterade when it comes to CGI with anime, even though I think most people who criticize CGI don't really know what bad CGI is.
I know what you're talking about.
Another thing is also that Yoshitaka Amano's artwork is nigh impossible to adapt on a anime production budget and timeline. You either have to have the most talented artists ever, or you have the most like bottomless pit of money and time to make his art styles work. And anytime that there's ever been a compromise, it's either been story or the visuals don't look that great or they just aren't animated well. We don't need to talk about what happened with GB8 and how Amano's artwork there was
butchered.
That's kindly putting it. But I think the characters are actually pretty interesting. We have Lewis, like we said, who's voiced by Nolan North. We have Nina, who's voiced by Ali Hillis. Mac, who is voiced by Robbie Damon. Oscar, who's voiced by Eugene Bird. And Patty, who's voiced by Nadine Nicole.
Such a great cast.
It's fun to see them interact with one another, like why they went on this mission, why they chose themselves to be part of the crew that's manning this freakishly nightmarish fish ship. Like, I just think that's interesting that I guess the technology that they needed looked like it came out of a nightmare or some horror story or something like that, because it's a weird, like the ship itself looks like a big old demon fish.
There is something very alien about their vessel.
And the design, like, I'm not going to question it. I'm not actually being serious when I ask this. But how did a mismanaged printing error, cause Lewis's body to shape into what it did as the creature at first? You had to be asleep at the wheel for that to be a huge issue. Like I said, I don't care. It's just funny that it's like, oh, a simple printing error, like just mutated poor Lewis at first.
Instead of like a more mundane mistake, like an extra pair of arms or like a third eye, he basically becomes unrecognizable.
I think the only time the visuals don't help the story, it's not really with the movements of the characters, so I can understand that people being taken out of it, because some studios have not yet reached the area of like Studio Orange or Mappa with how to do or make CGI animation work. I think more the problem comes from the environmental art. It all looks cool. This is a very distinct high fantasy looking sci-fi world. Like the designs are really cool. They're definitely Amano's work. It's so recognizable that even when bad adaptations happen, you can tell he designed a character. When stuff like when the ground shakes or things break, it's very low poly CGI with flat textures, despite the rather vibrant use of purples and blues.
That's where I noticed most of like the jankiness. As far as character designs, again, the only one that felt like kind of out of place is the misprint Lewis, but everyone else looks really good.
And there is action, and I think they handle the action as best as they could. I'm not entirely sure if it's on the hands of Tatsunoko Production or Studio 5 Inc. or Bakken Record for how they approached the animation and such, but it all looked pretty good. I mean, as of right now, a show has to hit X-Arm or, what was that, Tesla Notes? Anime that came out last year also that was just like, whoa, someone was still trying to figure out how to make the CGI work.
I completely forgot about that one.
Well, that's the thing. It's not as bad as X-Arm, but it's not as interesting as X-Arm is as like a piece of just, for the love of gravy, do not do this in terms of CGI animation. I will say it kind of dragged its heels a little after the first half. It gets interesting. It just turns from a sci-fi horror to more of a sci-fi thriller, because then you find out, oh, there might be another character who is betraying the crew to try to sabotage this whole quest to find a new planet. And maybe it's just because I haven't fully remembered every aspect of the story, but I could never quite catch what they were trying to throw. Like at first, I think they were trying to suggest that maybe Lewis was like the perfect printed Lewis was the bad guy because he spoke in a very authoritative tone. But then, like, well, spoilers as we move on forward with the story, we find out that who was it? Patty somehow printed out a second copy within a bootleg incubator like printing device, and that the whole mission was an abject failure before they even made it to the planet because of the information of what they would be doing to the planet to make it livable, and they didn't want to deal with that. So basically we have another, eco-terrorist slash maybe she actually has a good idea about maybe we shouldn't shift an entire planet's ecosystem just to fit us and whatever life was on this planet to die.
She falls in that interesting subgenre of villains that have the right idea. It's just the execution is where they took a wrong turn.
It's just funny because I think everyone has been having not total whiplash, but a lot of people have been like, wait a minute, why are we fighting the bad guy? I think they have a pretty decent point. I mean, granted, that point comes with genocide, but it's not like his points are all invalid. It's just funny to have that kind of mindset now, even though, yeah, that's the point. Like, the villain has good ideas, but also it's like killing people shouldn't be the result of it.
In my honest opinion, I really think the corporation they're all working for should be the main villain, but because we never see any of the higher ups, it of course has to be a traitor among the group. And I also thought for the longest time, like, that Mac was kind of being set up to be the villain, but I guess he was just a red herring.
Maybe they were going to go with like, oh, maybe the least suspecting person is going to be the villain, like Oscar or something. I could have seen Nina do it, but I don't think they were going to go that far with that. And I mean, it's kind of a bummer that the one person who is having a morality crisis of life and such is made out to be the bad guy, but I get it. Again, genocide's not the answer.
Actually, in hindsight, that does kind of make her moral quandary in the first couple episodes. It makes sense once you actually get to the reveal.
Right. And it ends on a really like somber but hopeful note of pretty much most of the crew dies outside of Lewis and Nina. And then it just becomes Nina. And it basically ends up being a better version of Passengers.
Oh my God, you're right.
They do keep the characters interesting. Like, even though Lewis is introduced, well, the perfect Lewis, or quote unquote perfect Lewis, is introduced a little too late, he still has an interesting backstory of why he's doing it. And like, even though it stumbled here and there, it was a pretty interesting sci-fi series. I definitely felt more attached to this than last year's Sunny Boy, where after a while I was just kind of like, what's the point of this show? Like, I kind of got what that show was doing, but then it hit a point where I was just like, man, I don't care. I'm losing track of what exactly is going on. Here, it's just, hey, they're trying to save their race. Things go wrong, and that's it.
Regarding Lewis's backstory, I think Kate works really well as his emotional center, even when it seems like both Lewis and the misprint are up to no good. Because of their backstory that they have only the best intentions, even if they can be viewed to some extent as selfish.
Yeah, right. I'd rather have a show like this fumble but still make the landing sort of, than just completely fail. Like, we don't need to go back into X-Arm again, where it basically ended with the main character dying and there's no end. There's no ending. It acts like there's going to be one more episode, but it was such a failure that it's a pointless show. It doesn't even try to have like, well, everything turned out to be okay in the end. At least at this show, getting to the ending might have not been the best, but the ending actually is hopeful for the human race and how life is treated and such.
I really like the ending of this. Any sort of happy ending, no matter how bittersweet it is, those are the kind of endings I usually prefer.
I mean, I'm fine with more nihilistic or cynical endings, but sometimes it's just good to have a more optimistic look on life. And I feel like that's how sci-fi is in general. You have the more hopeful aspect of sci-fi, which is, hey, we made it past the stars and everything's great. Or you hit the alien side of things, where it's just like, great, mega corporations are the only ones behind space travel, and they're putting us into the void of the unknown with unknown horrors that we probably can't deal with. This one is definitely more hopeful. I think give it a watch if you are like into headier philosophical sci-fi stories. Even if you don't like it, I feel like there still would be stuff to recommend over other sci-fi shows and such.
Agreed. Between this and Pantheon, this has been a good year for that sort of heady sci-fi animation.
I'm down for it. So it's time to talk about one of the biggest surprises of Netflix's original anime series to arrive on the platform, with Romantic Killer, a online animated series that's based off of the manga that's written and illustrated by Wataru Momose. It's directed by Kazuya Ichikawa. It's written by Sayuri Oba and Hiroko Fukuda. It's done by a studio called Domerica and was released on October 27th. Basically, we follow Anzu Hoshino, who is voiced in the English dub by Deneen Melody. The protagonist is this, high school girl who's not really interested in romance. She really has three things in her life: video games, chocolates, and her cat. One day, as she is about to play this video game that she pre-ordered, it turned out that the big epic RPG that she wanted was actually one of those really terrible dating sim otome games. This little creepy gremlin wizard known as Riri pops into being, and it's like, hey, you do not put love in your life, so I'm going to take away your chocolates, your video games, and your cat, and I'm going to stick you into what is essentially a mediocre otome game, or one that's fairly predictable, as she is thrust into dealing with multiple love interests. That includes a cold, reserved bad boy named Tsukasa Kazuki, voiced by Jason Griffith, the childhood friend named Junta Hayami, who's voiced by Alex Lee, and Hijiri Kogane, a wealthy tsundere-like boy voiced by Kellen Goff. First of all, great cast lineup right there. I mean, we have Deneen Melody, we have Courtney Lynn, Jason Griffith, Alex Lee, Kellen Goff.
Would it be typecasting if the voice of Shadow voiced the cold and reserved bad boy?
No. I mean, to be fair, he's not really a bad boy, but Tsukasa is the stereotype, the chosen one in terms of otome male leads, like the pristine S rank goal that you need.
And he's usually the first one that you bump into.
Right. And then you, like you said, you have the childhood friend who's just like, I've been with you forever, and now my feelings for you may or may not be bubbling to the surface. And then we have the rich snob, the a-hole of the group, who actually does care, but he's always like, yeah, I made sure you were okay. It's not like I was interested or anything. Though the biggest villain here, outside of who we'll talk about later, is Riri. This little trolling goblin is the most frustrating character, but also the most entertaining character of the bunch. This little chaos maker, it just forces Anzu into this situation because, and they don't sugarcoat it, they don't try to flower up the dialogue. They say, like, you need to go and get married and fall in love to save Japan's declining birth rate. And it's like, okay, no subtext, it's all text. I mean, I get it. That's what it is. Like, we've talked about a few shows in our anime discussions where it's like, man, this has some very ideals from that Japan are dealing with right now and such. So, like, I've talked to a few people about this, and it's just very interesting to talk about the political side of entertainment sometimes, even though a lot of people like to say, don't put politics in our art, even though art is inherently political. Anyway.
Right. I just love how completely upfront this show is about all of that. It's basically saying all the quiet parts out loud.
Pretty much. And what's fun about this show is that, yes, for pretty much the first half or so, maybe up until episode 8, it is all about Anzu and Riri knocking the wind out of stereotypical anime rom-com or otome game situations. And it's all about how Anzu pretty much does whatever she can to try to avoid falling in love with. It's like the reverse situation that My Life as a Villainess ran into, where she hit all of the romance options and now everyone loves her. But here, Anzu is just like, anytime a romantic situation comes up, nope, and just bails every time. And it's outside of the stuff that we're going to talk about that gets a little heavier by the last few episodes. It's a consistently wickedly funny show.
Everything from like some of the more subtler gags to all of Anzu's like big facial expressions cracked me up every single time.
The facial expression game in this anime is wild. You wouldn't see this stuff until like since maybe Cromartie High or Golden Boy. Like, very few anime out there ever went as hard as they did with the face reaction game. Like, some would do it more as like for the sake of comedy, but they would stay at like a 5. Like, oh, these are very typical facial reactions. They were not afraid to make Anzu look hideous or macho at times, which is fine. That makes her more of an interesting character instead of the show just being like, for the love of God, we were told to not make the characters emote too much. No, for something like this, you needed comedic animation. You needed slapstick. You needed physical comedy that goes through the roof. I can't imagine if someone who worked on this show said, like, in a position of power, said, you know what we'll take inspiration from? Vazrock the Animation, which is just, oh my gosh, consider it like the cheapest anime of the fall 2022 season. Like, lordy, you can tell how flimsy and cheap they are going with that show. Here, yes, it might not have the same level of animation that you would see in like a Kyo Annie or Mappa situation. Heck, this whole production company that worked on this show, Domerica, usually helped out with CGI productions. But they did a good job. I thought the 2D animation worked well for what it is. And like you said, the face reaction game is so strong. Easily like a 10 out of 10 on that regards. But I think one of my favorite details is how they handle the Otome game sections.
Oh my god, yes.
They look like intentionally bad X-Arm level CGI, but there was a point to it. Because sometimes, yeah, some companies would not have the budget or the time to actually polish out CGI. So it's like, well, it's functional. I loved how flimsy and clunky the CGI was used for the Otome sections. It's hilarious. And you can tell they did motion capture for these moments. And I don't care if it looks like obvious motion capture. It's hilarious. The designs are like deviant art level, silly looking. The proportions, the chins look like acorns. Or like the heads look like acorns with a anime wig on top of them.
If they tried to make these look polished, the joke wouldn't work. So I'm glad they intentionally made these look as ugly as possible.
And I love Riri's just being the most absurd anarchist of the whole show, just like going out of their way to make Anzu's life terrible until she falls in love. As the show goes on, it becomes less about taking the wind out of otome games and actually does something that, should be a given with most shows, but is not. The characters actually grow. Gas. Yep. Like, why is that so hard? I get it. Some characters in some shows have to keep them in one place until they reach that certain story beat where they can grow. But most of the time with stuff like Rent a Girlfriend or other bad rom-coms, the characters are stuck in one place and they can never evolve. Your character's not evolving, or if they regress, is a bad sign of bad storytelling. Here, they keep growing. They keep becoming less of their archetypes and more like three-dimensional.
This growth happens pretty early too. Like by episode 3, there's clearly like established rapport between Tsukasa and Anzu until a wrench gets thrown in, but that's par for the course.
And I like that the male love interests actually all become interesting characters. It's like, this might be another odd comparison, but this reminds me of Pleasantville. Do you remember that movie where where Tobey Maguire and
Reach for the Spoon
get warped into their favorite sitcom, and then everyone starts evolving and growing?
I see the comparison now.
It's basically that. It's like everyone acts because of the spells put on them by Riri as these stereotypical like characters and such that you would see in otome games. But as the magic weakens, the characters start to grow. It's like Anzu starts to be like, I don't need these things and I'm fine with that. And Tsukasa becomes less of a like on the loner, stone cold bad boy, and has a very tragic series of events and family life that makes him very distant. And that's why he is so distant from everyone until he meets Anzu in his life. And she starts to crack that shell of the defensive shell around Tsukasa, and he becomes more interested in her. And then with Junta, he's just kind of like, oh, I'm not really interested, but maybe I am. And then he's basically on the same level as Anzu, as like they can't deal with certain things. Anzu might still like take the award for the best face game, but Junta also has some very good facial reactions.
I love when he goes into like complete blink out mode where his eyes just become like those tiny pupils. He has some of the best full body reactions to basically anything that happens with Anzu and Kazuka.
I think my favorite animation detail of this show, and I think it's yours also. Let's talk about how they take the wind out of censorship.
Yes.
Anytime you see a bug on the show, some text will pop up and say, the bug is too horrifying for the audience, so we're going to replace it with a piece of cake or like some sweet crepe or something, like a sweet treat. And it's so funny how that happens. So you just, instead of seeing like a typical cockroach or a giant rhinoceros beetle flying around, it's a piece of cake. I love that detail. I love it. Because I've heard censorship guidelines are becoming more and more strict. So I'm all for shows taking the wind out of those restrictions. Like, not that there shouldn't be any, but I think the fact that they censored the one thing that shouldn't be censored, aka bugs,
right,
was just icing on the cake in per se.
There's literally no reason to censor these, but again, That's what makes the joke funnier.
It's a very like complex show because it becomes less rom-com and more romantic drama as all the characters, their bonds grow and they become close friends, and they keep it coy with how romantically involved they all are, and they take their time with it, which is nice because you don't need to rush into a relationship after the first date.
Right.
You can just go on the first date, see how things go, and then you can also just be friends. That sounds like such a hard concept, but I know some men like to say, well, I can't be friends with girls. And it's like, yes, you can. It's not impossible, man. You can have non-romantic feelings for people. But that's just part of the problem with how entertainment portrays romance, where it's like it's the most important thing ever. And here the show is just like, yeah, romance is important, but there's also very toxic ways of showing relationships and romance.
So you ready to get into the heavier stuff?
Yeah, so let's talk about the heavier stuff. So spoilers from here on out. Some of the stuff that Tsukasa deals with is you get slight hints of it, and then a comment from his sister saying that like life at the household was not great. The dad is a new contender and worst dad in anime. Like, oh my goodness. Definitely a more realistic and terrible dad, because at least here it's just he doesn't take the harassment his son is dealing with seriously, which is also like so much worse than what you see in like Evangelion or that one period drama that we watched last year during the fall season. I forgot what it was called. Like Otome Fairy Tale or something like that.
Something like that. But yeah, this dad is the more grounded version of a piece of shit, but he's still a piece of shit.
Good Lord, his son is getting stalked. Like, you find out that the reason why Tsukasa is so resistant to relationships, romantic or not, is because of how he basically got harassed for being the pretty boy, but also he got stalked by a woman who thought she was the only one for him. And when he brought it up to his family, everyone except for the dad is like, we gotta call the cops. The only reason it never happened is because the dad was like, well, you should man up. It's your fault for leading her on. And it's like, no, what the hell are you talking about, you lunatic? First of all, don't say that no matter who you're saying it to. It's not their fault.
That is so backwards thinking that
it's gaslighting.
Yeah.
Basically. To put it lightly, it's not cool. It's ridiculous that this dad is like, my son is being stalked. It's his fault. It's like, no. It was rage-inducing just sitting there and like, okay, where's my death note? I have a name I want to put down in it. Then it's just like, no legal action is taken. And the stalker becomes the toxic side of romance, the symbolism for it. And they do stop her, but the show, I think its one major fumble is how they handle the stalker. It's like they show like, yes, the father was in the wrong at all times. There should have been help. There should have been security. They should have arrested a woman who was stalking him. But then it implies that maybe Riri killed the stalker with their magic. Like, that's what it was implied, which is what, like, because at the end of the episode or near the end of it, Riri gets replaced, and the replacement's like, yeah, Riri used magic when it was not allowed for romantic situations.
And one of like the most common rules for genies is like, I can't use my magic.
Then it's like, okay, but they bring Riri back, and it ends with pretty much everyone being close friends, which include like the sister to Tsukasa, the friend to Junta, who, like, by the way, Junta's friend is voiced by Ryan Colt Levy.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, great voice actor, lovely guy on Twitter. Then like there are other like friends as well, but they don't get enough time to really be fleshed out. because let's see here. Saki Takamine, the one with the purple hair,
Yep.
she's not given a whole lot of time in the spotlight. Her arc is she had to deal with harassment and then bad rumor mill talk because she rejected a guy who was trying to be above it all and say like, yeah, well, you're mine. But then her story just kind of stops after. It's just like, oh, Anzu was just a really good friend and such.
I'm only a touch disappointed because that was such a heavy episode and probably one of the best. But then she just kind of disappears from the rest of the story.
It reminds me of how in like A Silent Voice they introduce a character during the later half of the midway point of the film. What's so funny about it is he has like no reason to be in the movie because he doesn't really add anything. And you think, oh, maybe he had more of a substantial role in the manga and whatever. But in the movie, you could cut him out and nothing would be missed. You couldn't cut out Saki here because I think her story arc is important to the overarching story of romance, like how this show tackles romance. But it is a shame that hers is cut short because then it's just like, oh, she has a like Yakuza older brother, but it doesn't go very far. But also they imply that the stalker is still around because you see another one of those little wizard things fly towards this woman who is obviously the stalker. I'm not sure what they're trying to show with that. Like, will she be redeemed if this thing gets a second season? And I just don't know if that's a good idea or not. I think I'd rather they just cut the character out. But we'll just have to see how well this does because, like with Crunchyroll originals or Netflix original anime, it's hard to know exactly how successful they are as shows and such.
I hope this one's successful because I saw a few discussions pop up on Twitter, but it doesn't feel like one that like everyone is buzzing about, but it still feels pretty popular.
Yeah, and it's a very good show. Like, I've been very impressed with some of the Netflix original anime from this year. Like Totoro Lives Alone was also really good, and that was a Netflix original. The voice cast does a really good job. The animation is so vibrant and colorful and expressive. It's a good story in a industry like anime production where so many shows get made and there's just no substance to them and they become forgotten within a few months to even like a few weeks of release. It's important for shows like Romantic Killer to really stand out, make the jump, and then land. While it's not my favorite anime of the year, I would say it's maybe in my top 20.
Probably top 15, top 20 for me, but it's one I would definitely recommend. Especially if you like romantic comedies or if you don't but love stories that kind of like take jabs at all of the tropes and cliches, you'll get a kick out of this one for sure.
Watch it for the expressions alone. This is a good template show to watch for comedy. They go all out and you rarely see the same expression twice. It's a delightful show.
For my recommendation this week, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that this month is the 10-year anniversary of probably one of the most groundbreaking shorts in all of animation, at least in the modern era, Disney's Paperman. I think this is one of the first times that in recent memory that I've seen 3D animation and 2D animation blending this well to the point that we're still seeing the effects of its influence in many future productions, like the Peanuts movie to some extent, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, The Mitchells vs. the Machines, Arcane, and several others.
I remember at the time it was really a marvel of animation. And unfortunately, the downside of it was stupidly expensive. Probably one of the most expensive animated shorts Disney ever had to put out because of its new technology at the time. And even though now it's like, oh, every studio can do this. Back then, it was like, wow, imagine doing a movie like this. And I'm sure they could actually make one that looks exactly like Paperman.
Or at least close.
Like, they won't, because they're going to focus more on 4 quadrant releases of like what will get the most butts and seats. And I mean, like, unless they could make something akin to Paperman, I would be very happy to see them do that, because it's always kind of interesting. Disney used to be the innovator, but now other studios are doing more than them.
As long as Eric Goldberg is still keeping to his word that 2D animation will be brought back, I'm sure we'll see more stuff like this in the next, like, maybe 5 to 10 years. And from what we've been hearing about their next movie, Wish, it seems like we're kind of starting to head into that direction.
I'm hoping for the best, because animation is only going to get better as technology evolves and studios break loose from trying to be too traditional or in their ways.
One last thing I'll say about Paperman, the biggest lesson that we've all learned from this is that when it comes to animation, there is always room for the envelope to be pushed.
For my recommendation, I'm going to talk about some anime. So if you're curious if when we're going to be doing our big anime episode, we're going to push off till December to do a yearly wrap up of how the anime year was for 2022. Talk about trends, do a little wrap up of the fall 2022 lineup, and like choose our favorites, what we didn't like. Like, I'll still be doing a personal like impressions article on this season of anime and such, but we're going to just do a big episode in December, or at least that's the plan. We'll of course make sure to keep y'all in touch if things change. I guess I could talk about, some hipster underground anime that came out this season. I mean, I don't think anyone knows what it's about. I think it's called like Chain, Saw, and Man or something like that. It's made by Mappa. And okay, it's Chainsaw Man and Mappa. It is so good. Only Mappa, barring the criticisms I have of them from the past, and hoping that they are treating their animators better now, Chainsaw Man might be the most impressive work that Mappa has ever done. It's an ambitious combination of 2D and CGI, with the animation acting very much theatrical quality every episode. There are small details here and there of how the animation is handled, and the directing, the characters are all interesting. The violence is a lot. Like, if you're squeamish, don't watch this show. In general, you should watch this show. Everyone is. It's pretty much on top of Spy X Family, My Hero Academia's new season, and the slightly controversial Mob Psycho 100 final season. It's pretty much the show to watch. I think there are some other shows that deserve some more love also, like Do It Yourself, but we'll talk about that later. But I'll pretty much start recommending anime as we build up to this final anime podcast episode.
Quick question. Favorite ending so far?
I have to go through some of them again, but Chainsaw Man definitely has the best opening and the best ending. So far, I think fall 2022 is not as good as fall 2021 in terms of shows. Like, I just think there were way more and way better shows in general with fall 2021. But like Blue Lock has a great opening and ending. Reincarnated as a Sword is fun. I'm the Villainous, so I'm Taming the Final Boss has a solid ending. Bocchi the Rock is really good.
Asked it because Chainsaw Man has like a new ending per episode, which I think is a really cool idea.
I've only gone to episode 2 right now, and I think the ending to that one is better than the first one. So we'll have to do like a ranking article or something on which one gets the best ending. I mean, you could tell they're putting a lot of money into Chainsaw Man to have so many different endings and just to have this amazing amount of animation.
Oh, yeah.
And so next time, what the plan is, unless things get in the way, is we're going to talk about My Father's Dragon. We're going to get back into the Ghibli reviews with Porco Rosso. Sorry for the delay. things just got really busy. And this one Netflix animated film that Netflix just doesn't really know how to market to anyone because it's called the Soccer Football Movie. It's a CGI film, and there's been no trailers, one clip, and there is no information about who made the movie. Good signs.
Yeah, the fact that it doesn't even have a Wikipedia page is concerning.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's a Vanguard animation project, but we'll have to see when we get to it.
Hoping for the best. Until next time, Cameron, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Cam's Eye View, or I'm going to try to see if there are other social media sites to use because, Twitter's a dumpster fire right now. But you can find me there. I have a website called camseyeview.biz where I review animated films and shows from around the world called The Other Side of Animation. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/camseyeview. That's where you can find me.
And you can find me, for now at least, on Twitter at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com. That's quickk42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and, again, for now, Twitter at Ren Pop Culture. You can also find us on Podchaser, on YouTube, on the Banana Meter. Listen to all of our podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. Need to escape? So do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Animation. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.